in the heart of the celestial spire, a palace carved from living crystal that pulsed with the slow, rhythmic heartbeat of the planet itself. Joran scrubbed. His knuckles were raw, his back permanently bent from years of mopping the polished obsidian floors that reflected the twin moons like shattered mirrors. He was a commoner, born in the dust-choked alleys of the Undercity, sold to the palace at 12 for a loaf of synth bread and a promise of shelter. Now 23, he knew every crack in every tile, every echo in every corridor, every whisper that drifted from the throne room when the courtiers thought no one was listening. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never looked up unless commanded. And yet, his eyes, deep brown and startlingly human in a court of alien nobles, saw everything. The Empress Virelii ruled the Zenthari dominion with a grace that masked an iron will. Her skin shimmered like jade under the palace's ambient glow, and her long silken hair, white as frozen starlight, flowed down her back like a river of moonlight. She wore armor of interwoven silver and emerald scales that shifted with her breath, and her ears tapered to elegant points, twitching at the slightest disturbance in the air. To the court, she was perfection incarnate. Regal, untouchable, divine. But Joran had seen her once, late at night, standing alone on the sky balcony, her shoulders slumped, her fingers tracing the edge of a locket that held the ashes of her murdered brother. He ducked behind a pillar, heart hammering, hoping she hadn't noticed him. She had. Her gaze had flickered toward his hiding place, just for a breath, but she'd said nothing. That moment had haunted him ever since. Joran's days were a blur of soap, steam, and silence. He cleaned the Hall of Echoes, where treaties were signed in languages older than stars. He polished the obsidian staircase, where ambassadors from 100 worlds climbed to beg for mercy or trade. He even scrubbed the war room after the last skirmish with the Krelix rebels, his sponge soaking up not just spilled wine but flecks of dried plasma and the metallic tang of fear. The nobles barely acknowledged him. To them, he was furniture less than furniture, for even chairs were treated with reverence. Once, a Zenthari lord had kicked over his bucket, just to watch the water spill across the floor, laughing as Joran scrambled to contain the mess. Another time, a visiting diplomat from the Azure Concord had mistaken him for a servant bot and tried to plug a data cable into his neck. Joran had learned to move like a shadow, to breathe like silence, to exist without taking up space. But he had a secret, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in his tiny chamber. A closet really, tucked behind the laundry chutes, was a device. Not just any device. A resonance harmonizer, salvaged from a wrecked scout ship that had crash-landed near the Undercity years ago. He traded 3 weeks' rations for it, not knowing what it was, only that it hummed when he held it, like it recognized him. Over time, he'd tinkered with it, using scraps of wire and stolen power cells, until it responded to his touch. Could amplify sound, yes, but more than that, it could translate emotion into frequency. Joy became a golden chime. Sorrow, a low cello note. Rage, a shattering chord. He'd never told anyone. In a world where difference meant death, secrets were survival. One evening, as Joran mopped the grand atrium, a cavernous space where the ceiling opened to the swirling nebula above, he heard shouting from the throne room. Not the usual polite bickering of ministers, but real panic. He froze, bucket in hand. Through the arched doorway, he saw Empress Virelii standing rigid, her white hair crackling with static. Before her knelt General Zorvok, a hulking Zenthari warrior with crimson tattoos and a voice like grinding stone. The Krelix have breached the outer rim, Zorvok growled. They've taken the Helios array. Without it, our shields fail in 3 solar cycles. We're blind, your radiance. Virelii's hands clenched. How? Sabotage. From within. His eyes swept the room, landing on trembling courtiers. Someone here is a traitor. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Accusations flew like poison darts. Fingers pointed. Alliances shattered. Virelii's face remained calm, but Joran, who had crept closer, hidden behind a pillar shaped like a coiled serpent, saw the tremor in her jaw. She was alone, surrounded by vipers and utterly alone. That night, sleepless, Joran sat on his pallet, the harmonizer glowing softly in his palm. He thought of the Empress on the balcony, of the locket, of the way her voice had cracked when she'd sentenced a traitor last month. Not with anger, but grief. He didn't know why, but he pressed his thumb to the device and whispered, "Show me the truth." The harmonizer pulsed. A hologram flickered to life, not of people but of sounds. Emotional signatures. In the throne room, most were jagged red spikes. Fear, greed, deceit. But one glowed steady and deep blue, Vareliai's. And beneath it, almost buried, a thin silver thread led away to the war room, to a console no one used, to a hidden channel. Joran's breath caught. He knew that console. He'd cleaned around it 100 times. There was a loose panel behind it, just big enough for a data chip. He waited until the third moon rose, then slipped through the palace like smoke. The war room was empty, guarded only by dormant sentry drones. With trembling hands, he pried open the panel. Inside, nestled in a nest of wires, was a black chip etched with the Krellic sigil. A coiled serpent eating its own tail. His heart hammered. If he took it, he'd be seen as a thief. If he left it, the Dominion would fall. He hesitated, then tucked the chip into his tunic and ran. He didn't get far. Alarms blared. Red lights flooded the corridor. From the shadows stepped Zorvok, flanked by 4 armored guards. "The rat emerges," the general sneered. "Drop the chip, filth, or I'll peel your skin off one strip at a time." Joran backed against the wall, the harmonizer burning in his pocket. He had no weapons, no rank, no name. But he had one thing Zorvok didn't. He knew the palace better than his own heartbeat. He bolted. What followed was a chase through the living labyrinth of the celestial spire. Joran darted through servant tunnels, slid down laundry chutes, swung from crystal vines in the botanical wing. Zorvok roared behind him, his heavy boots cracking tiles. Joran's lungs burned. His legs screamed. But he didn't stop. He reached the Hall of Mirrors, a corridor lined with reflective panels that showed infinite versions of himself, all terrified, all running. There he tripped. The chip skittered across the floor. Zorvok lunged for it. But Joran slammed his palm onto the harmonizer and shouted into it, pouring every ounce of his fear, his hope, his desperation into the device. A sound erupted, not loud, but deep, a frequency that vibrated through bone and metal alike. The mirrors shattered, not from force, but from resonance. Glass rained down like diamonds. Zorvok staggered, clutching his ears, blood trickling from his nose. The guards collapsed, disoriented. Panting, Joran snatched the chip and ran again, straight to the sky balcony. He didn't know why he went there. Maybe because it was the only place he'd ever seen the Empress look human. She was there, just as before, staring into the void. She turned as he burst onto the balcony, her eyes widening at the sight of him, disheveled, bleeding, clutching the chip like a lifeline. "Your radiance," he gasped, falling to his knees. "I found it, the traitor's chip. It's been transmitting to the Krellics for weeks." She didn't speak, just stared. Then, slowly, she knelt before him, not as Empress, as Vareliai. "Why?" she asked, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "You could have sold it, run, hidden. Why bring it to me?" Joran looked up, meeting her luminous green eyes for the first time without flinching. "Because someone had to." She took the chip. Her fingers brushed his warm, despite her alien skin. For a heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then the palace shook. Not from an earthquake, from an explosion. The Krellics had come early. Ships, jagged, insectoid things, swarmed the sky, their weapons carving fire across the palace spires. Shields flickered and died. Screams echoed from below. Vareliai stood, her expression hardening into the Empress once more. But as she turned to leave, she paused. "Come with me," she said. Joran blinked. "Me? You heard the traitor's frequency," she said. "You understand the harmonizer. The Krellics use sonic disruptors. They'll shatter our defenses from within. We need someone who can listen." He didn't hesitate. Yes. What followed was chaos-made strategy. Vareliai led him through collapsing corridors to the core chamber, a spherical room at the heart of the palace where the planetary shield generator hummed like a sleeping god. Around them, Zenthari warriors fought desperately against Krellics infiltrators, sleek, chitinous soldiers with too many eyes and blades that sang as they cut. Vareliai fought like a storm given form, her emerald armor flashing, her white hair whipping like a banner. Joran stayed near the core, the harmonizer clutched tight. He could feel the Krellics attack. Not just hear it, but feel it. A discordant shriek tearing at the shield's harmony. "They're targeting the resonance nodes," he yelled over the din. "If they overload node 7, the whole system collapses." Vareliai nodded, barking orders. A squad broke off, racing to defend the node. But the Krellics were relentless. One of their commanders, a towering figure with a face like cracked obsidian, strode forward, raising a sonic lance. Joran saw it before anyone else. The weapon wasn't aimed at the warriors. It was aimed at him, at the harmonizer. He dove. The blast hit the core instead. The sound was unbearable. A scream of metal and light. The shield generator sputtered. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. "No!" Varelii cried. Joran scrambled up, blood in his eyes. He knew what he had to do. He plugged the harmonizer into the core's emergency port. A port meant for royal bloodline only. But the device didn't care about bloodlines. Cared about intent. He closed his eyes and sang. Not with his voice, with his soul. He poured every memory into the frequency. The sting of the Lord's boot, the taste of synth bread, the loneliness of the mop bucket, the quiet sorrow on the Empress's face, the hope that maybe, just maybe, he mattered. The harmonizer amplified it all. A symphony of a commoner's heart. The core responded. Light erupted, not white, but gold. It spread through the palace, through the city, through the very air. The Krellick's weapons shattered. Their ships convulsed, their sonic systems overloading from the sheer emotional purity of the frequency. The invaders screamed, clutching their heads, as the resonance turned their own weapons against them. Silence fell. The Krellicks retreated, their fleet limping into the void. In the core chamber, Joran collapsed. Varelii caught him before he hit the floor. "You," she whispered, her voice thick. "You saved us all." He tried to smile. "Just did my job." She laughed. A real laugh, bright and unexpected. "Your job is no longer scrubbing floors." Later, in the rebuilt throne room, bathed in the soft glow of the twin moons, Empress Varelii made an announcement that shook the Dominion to its core. Joran, once a nameless commoner, was named Royal Resonant, a title never before given to a human, or to anyone outside the bloodline. He would advise her on matters of harmony, defense, and truth. But more than that, in the quiet hours, when the court slept and the palace hummed its gentle song, they walked the sky balcony together. She no longer stood alone, and he no longer looked down. He wept floors as a commoner, until the alien Empress realized his true worth was not in his hands, but in his heart. And in a galaxy of steel and stars, that was the rarest frequency of all. Weeks passed, and the celestial spire shimmered anew, its wounds sealed with crystalline grafts that pulsed brighter than before. Joran, now addressed as Resonant Joran by even the haughtiest of courtiers, walked its corridors not with a mop, but with quiet authority, the harmonizer strapped to his belt like a badge of honor. Yet peace in the Zenthari Dominion was never more than a breath held too long. Whispers returned, not of rebellion this time, but of something older, deeper. The silent choir. It began with dreams. Empress Varelii woke screaming 3 nights in a row, her white hair tangled with sweat, her green skin ashen. She spoke of voices, not Krellick's, not human, not Zenthari, but something that had no name, only a hum that unraveled thought. Joran listened, his fingers brushing the harmonizer. When he played back the ambient resonance of her chamber, he found it. A frequency buried beneath all others, so low it vibrated in the marrow. It wasn't transmitting, it was calling. Then the disappearances started. First, a sentry on the eastern spire. Vanished, armor intact, boots still laced. Then a botanist from the verdant wing gone, with only a single petal left floating in midair, frozen in time. By the 5th disappearance, panic slithered through the palace like smoke. The court blamed the Krellicks. Others whispered of ancient curses. But Joran knew better. This wasn't invasion. It was harvesting. One evening, as he and Varelii reviewed star charts in the observation dome, the sky itself rippled. Not a storm, not a ship, just a distortion, like reality had blinked. The harmonizer shrieked in his hand, its usual calm replaced by frantic pulses. Before he could react, the dome's crystalline floor liquefied beneath them. Not melted, unmade. They fell through layers of solid matter as if it were mist, tumbling into darkness. They landed in a chamber that defied geometry. Walls curved inward and outward at once. Light came from no source yet filled every corner. And in the center floated a being, not solid, not energy, but something in between. Tall, slender, with limbs that bent in impossible angles. Its skin shimmered like oil on water. Its face held no eyes, only a smooth oval that pulsed with the same frequency Joran had heard in Varelii's dreams. "The resonant," it said. its voice not sound but vibration inside their skulls. You answered the call. Virelii drew her blade, but the weapon flickered like a dying flame. Who are you? We are the Echoes, it replied. The last of the first singers. Your species built your civilization on the bones of our song. You silenced us, but you could not erase us. Joran's mind raced. Ancient texts spoke of the first singers, beings who shaped reality with harmonic resonance before the Zenthari rose. They were thought extinct, erased in the Great Silencing, a war so old it was myth. You're using the Krelliks, Joran realized aloud. You manipulated them into attacking the palace, to weaken the planetary shield so you could return. The Echo tilted its head. Clever, but incomplete. We did not use the Krelliks. We replaced them. Their minds are ours now. Hollow vessels singing our return. A cold dread coiled in Joran's gut. If the Krelliks fleet was under Echo control, then the Dominion wasn't safe, it was already lost. The Echo extended a limb toward him. You carry the harmonic key, the device that can restore our form. Give it to us and we will spare your world. Refuse, and we will unmake it note by note. Joran clutched the harmonizer. It wasn't just a tool. It was the last remnant of the first singer's technology, crafted not to amplify emotion, but to anchor reality. He'd misunderstood its purpose all along. He looked at Virelii. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with fury. She gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. Don't give it to them. I'll give you something, Joran said, stepping forward. But not the key. He slammed the harmonizer against the floor. Instead of shattering, it sang. A pure, defiant chord that clashed violently with the Echo's frequency. The chamber screamed. Reality buckled. Cracks tore through the air like glass breaking. The Echo shrieked, its form fraying at the edges. Run! Joran grabbed Virelii's hand. They sprinted through collapsing corridors of sound and shadow, the palace above flickering in and out of existence around them. Behind them, the Echo reformed. Not one, but dozens, their forms multiplying like reflections in a shattered mirror. They didn't chase. They unfolded, spreading through the spire like ink in water. Back in the throne room, chaos reigned. Courtiers floated midair, frozen in silent terror. Guards stood motionless, their eyes glowing with that same oily sheen. The Echoes weren't killing. They were rewriting. They're turning the palace into a resonance chamber, Joran panted. If they complete the harmonic loop, they'll overwrite all life on the planet with their consciousness. Virelii's jaw tightened. Then we break the loop. How? The core, she said. It's the only place strong enough to broadcast a counterfrequency. But we'll need more than your device. We'll need my bloodline resonance. And yours. Joran stared. Mine? I'm just human. You're the first human to ever harmonize with Zenthari core energy, she said, gripping his shoulders. That makes you something new, something they can't predict. They fought their way to the core chamber, blades flashing, dodging echo-touched warriors whose movements were eerily synchronized. At one point, Virelii took a glancing blow to the arm, her green blood sizzling where the echo energy touched it. Joran caught her before she fell, his heart hammering not just from fear, but from something deeper, something he hadn't let himself name. Inside the core chamber, the generator glowed erratically, its rhythm erratic. The Echoes were already inside it, their forms woven into its circuits. There's no time for ceremony, Virelii said, slicing her palm open with her dagger. She pressed it to the core's activation rune. Place your hand beside mine, and sing Joran, not with the device, with your soul. He did. As their blood mingled on the ancient metal, the harmonizer fused with the core, dissolving into light. A new frequency bloomed, not Zenthari, not human, but something born of both. It surged through the palace, through the city, through the planet's crust. The Echoes screamed as their forms destabilized. Their perfect harmony shattered under the weight of something they couldn't comprehend. Imperfect love. The palace stabilized. The frozen courtiers gasped back to life. The sky cleared, but the victory was short-lived. Days later, as Joran stood on the sky balcony, still healing, still haunted, he received a transmission from the Outer Rim. Not from the Krelliks. From a human colony ship, the Aurora Dawn, long thought lost. The message was fragmented, desperate. They're coming? Not echoes, something worse. They wear our faces. They speak with our voices. They remember everything. The screen flickered, and for a single frame, Joran saw a face he knew. His younger sister, Lyra, sold into off-world labor when he was 10. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. Varelii joined him, her white hair catching the starlight. "What is it?" Joran didn't answer right away. He stared at the stars, where new shadows stirred. The echoes were gone, but they had opened a door, and through it came things that wore the skin of the dead. "They're using memories," he whispered, "not just to control, but to lure." Varelii's hand found his. "Then we'll meet them with truth." But truth, Joran knew, was fragile. And in a galaxy where reality could be rewritten with a single note, even love could be mimicked. Yet as the twin moons rose, casting silver light over the spire, he made a decision. He would not hide. He would not run. He would build a new kind of resonance, one not of power but of connection. He began drafting plans for a network of harmonic beacons across the Dominion, each tuned to a unique emotional signature, a living archive of real feeling. It would take years. It would take trust. It would take risk. And it would take her. Varelii watched him work, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she said, "You once wept floors as a commoner." "I did," he replied, not looking up. "Now you shape the song of worlds." He finally met her gaze. "Only because someone taught me I had a voice." She smiled, small, real, and full of unspoken things. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but in the heart of the celestial spire, something new was growing. Not empire, not dominion, but partnership. And somewhere beyond the rim, the false faces waited, wearing the smiles of the lost, singing songs that sounded like home. But Joran knew the difference now, and he would never be fooled again. In the weeks that followed the Echo incursion, the celestial spire settled into a fragile calm, but beneath the surface, something quieter and more profound began to stir. Joran no longer merely advised the Empress. He walked beside her, not as a servant elevated by circumstance, but as a presence she sought out even when silence was all they shared. Their bond, forged in crisis, deepened in the stillness between storms. It started with small things. Varelii began leaving the throne room early, just to find him in the resonance archives, a vault deep beneath the palace where ancient harmonic texts hummed in glass cases. She'd sit beside him on the low obsidian bench, her white hair spilling over one shoulder, and listen as he explained how certain frequencies could soothe trauma or sharpen focus. He never spoke down to her, never flinched from her questions. And when she admitted she didn't understand a concept, he'd rephrase it, not simpler but clearer, as if he saw her mind not as alien, but as a landscape worth navigating with care. One evening, after a council session that had left her jaw clenched and her fingers drumming a tense rhythm on the arm of her throne, she found him in the botanical wing, calibrating a new harmonic emitter near the moon orchids, flowers that only bloomed under specific emotional frequencies. He didn't look up as she entered, but the emitter's tone softened instantly, shifting from a sharp alert chime to something warm and low, like a lullaby half-remembered. "How did you know I was upset?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. He turned, wiping grease from his hands. "Your resonance signature changes when you're holding back anger. It spikes in the upper harmonics, like a string pulled too tight." She stared at him. "You can hear my emotions?" "Not exactly," he said, stepping closer. "I feel them, like pressure in the air, like standing too close to a storm." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Then you've been hearing me for weeks." He hesitated, then nodded. "Since the balcony. Since you looked at me like I was more than a shadow." She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached out, slowly, deliberately, and touched the back of his hand. Her fingers were cool, her skin smooth as polished jade. "Then hear this," she said softly. "I am grateful, and afraid, and something else I don't have a word for in Zenthari." He didn't pull away. "In human, we call it hope." Their eyes held. The orchids around them trembled, then bloomed, silver petals unfurling in a cascade of soft light. From then on, they carved out moments for themselves in the cracks of duty. Mornings before court, they'd walk the sky balcony, watching the twin suns rise over the city. She taught him the names of the constellations in her tongue. He told her stories of Earth, of oceans that stretched forever, of snow that fell like ash from a gentle sky. She laughed at his description of rain, incredulous that water could fall from the air without command. He teased her about Zenthari formal dining, where one wrong gesture could insult an entire star system. Once, During a rare afternoon of peace, she challenged him to a sparring match in the warrior's courtyard. He protested he was no fighter, but she insisted. "You defended the core with your mind," she said, tossing him a practice blade made of resonant alloy. "Now defend yourself with your body." He was clumsy at first, tripping over his own feet, but she didn't mock him. She corrected his stance, her hands firm but never harsh on his shoulders. When he finally landed a glancing blow on her guard, she grinned. A fierce, radiant thing that lit up her green face like dawn. "There," she said. "You're learning." Later, as they sat on the courtyard steps, breathing hard, she handed him a flask of Zalti, a bitter Zenthari brew that cleared the mind. He grimaced at the taste, and she laughed again. Real, unguarded laughter that drew the attention of passing guards, who quickly looked away, stunned. But it wasn't all ease and laughter. One night, Joran woke to the sound of shattering glass. He found Varelii in the war room, standing over the shattered remains of her brother's locket, the one he'd seen her hold on the balcony all those months ago. She hadn't spoken of him since the Echo attack, but now her shoulders shook with silent sobs, her white hair tangled over her face. He didn't speak, didn't offer empty comfort. He simply knelt beside her, gathered the fragments of the locket, and held them in his palm. Then, using the harmonizer's residual energy, he wove a soft frequency around the pieces, not to repair them, but to preserve the moment. The shards hovered in the air, glowing faintly, suspended in a sphere of golden light. "He would have liked you," she whispered, her voice raw. "Why?" Joran asked gently. "Because you see people," she said, turning to him. "Not titles, not bloodlines, just people." He reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Her skin was warm now, warmer than usual. She leaned into his touch, just for a heartbeat, before pulling back, not in rejection, but in restraint. "I am Empress," she said, though it sounded less like a declaration and more like a warning. "And I am just Joran," he replied. "But that doesn't mean I don't matter." She looked at him for a long time. Then, quietly, "You matter more than anyone." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Their bond deepened further when the Aurora Dawn transmission led them to a derelict station orbiting the dead moon of Kethra. Intelligence suggested the Echoes, or whatever now wore their faces, were using it as a staging ground. Varelii insisted on leading the mission herself. Joran refused to let her go alone. Inside the station, they found horrors. Human and Zenthari bodies suspended in stasis pods, their minds being siphoned to create perfect mimics. Among them Lyra, Joran's sister, alive, but hollow-eyed, repeating his childhood nickname in a voice that was hers and yet not. He nearly broke, but Varelii was there. She didn't try to pull him away. Instead, she stood guard while he knelt beside the pod, placing his palm against the glass. He sang, not a frequency to destroy, but one to remember, a lullaby their mother used to hum. The harmonizer, now integrated into his neural implant, amplified it into a beam of pure memory. Lyra's eyes flickered. For a second, they were hers, wide, scared but aware. She mouthed, "Jor," before the mimicry reasserted itself. He wept then, silently, his shoulders shaking. Varelii knelt beside him, her arm around his back, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of his grief. "We'll get her back," she promised, her voice low and fierce. "All of them." On the return shuttle, as the station burned behind them, she held his hand the entire way. No words, just warmth, just presence. Back in the palace, their closeness did not go unnoticed. Whispers returned, not of treason this time, but of scandal. A human consorting with the Empress? Some nobles called for his exile. Others demanded his execution. Varelii silenced them all with a single decree. He who questions the resonant questions the stability of the Dominion itself. But even she couldn't ignore the growing tension within the High Council. General Zorvok, humiliated but not broken, began rallying traditionalists who saw Joran as a corruption of Zenthari purity. Rumors spread that he was using emotional sorcery to manipulate the Empress. One evening, as they reviewed defense plans in her private chambers, Varelii set down her datapad and turned to him. "They want me to choose," she said, "between my throne and you." Joran's chest tightened. "Then choose your throne." "I already did," she said, stepping closer. "The moment I let you into my life, I chose a different kind of rule. Not one of blood and silence, but of trust, of heart." He looked into her eyes, luminous green, flecked with gold like distant stars, and saw not just an empress, but a woman who had risked everything for truth. "And if they force your hand?" he asked. "Then I will abdicate," she said simply. He shook his head. "No, you were born to lead. I won't be the reason your people lose you." She touched his face. "Then help me lead with you, not despite you." In that moment, something shifted, not just between them but within the very fabric of their world. The next day, Varelii announced a new decree. The Resonant would co-preside over the Harmony Council, a body tasked with integrating emotional intelligence into Dominion policy. It was unprecedented, revolutionary, dangerous, but as they stood side by side on the throne dais, she in her emerald armor, he in a simple tunic woven with harmonic threads, the court fell silent. Not in outrage, but in awe. For the first time, the palace didn't just pulse with power, it sang with balance. And in the quiet hours that followed, when the stars watched and the moons listened, they allowed themselves what neither had dared before. A kiss. Soft, certain, real. It wasn't the end of danger. The mimics still lurked. Zorvak plotted. The galaxy remained vast and cruel. But in the heart of the celestial spire, two souls, human and alien, commoner and empress, had found something rarer than power. They had found each other, and that, they knew, was the truest frequency of all. In the year that followed, the Dominion transformed not through conquest but through connection. Joran and Varelii stood together not as ruler and advisor, but as partners, weaving human empathy into Zenthari's strength. The harmonic beacon spread across 100 worlds, each pulsing with the unique emotional signature of its people, shielding them from mimicry and silence alike. Lyra was recovered. Her mind healed through Joran's resonance and Varelii's royal healers, and she became the first human ambassador to the Dominion. General Zorvak, stripped of rank but granted mercy, found purpose training a new guard sworn to protect truth over tradition. The echoes never returned. Their song had been drowned not by force, but by the louder Messier, more beautiful symphony of living hearts. On the anniversary of the Corps' salvation, beneath the twin moons and a sky thick with stars, Varelii laid down her crown, not to abandon her throne, but to remake it. Before the entire court, she took Joran's hands and declared him her consort of harmony, the first human to share the celestial spire not as servant, but as sovereign equal. There were no protests, only tears and cheers, for the people had felt the change in the air, the warmth, the hope, the quiet joy that had seeped into the palace stones. They married in the botanical wing, surrounded by blooming moon orchids and the soft hum of 1,000 beacons singing in unison. Their union became legend. The empress with jade skin and starlight hair, and the commoner who taught a galaxy that worth is not born, it is chosen. Together, they ruled with wisdom and laughter, raising not just policy, but possibility. When their first child, a girl with green-tinged skin, white hair, and warm brown eyes, was born, the palace resonated with a new frequency, one of legacy, love, and lasting peace. And on quiet nights, they still walked the sky balcony, hand in hand, watching the stars not as threats, but as neighbors. The galaxy remained vast, but they were no longer alone. They had built a home, not in stone or crystal, but in each other. And in that home, every heart was heard, every soul seen, and every ending, finally, happily ever after.